Tonight, we travel into the quiet, intricate world of the geisha, a tradition rooted in centuries of discipline, beauty, and mystery. You'll follow her journey from a young apprentice to a woman of refined presence, walking through history one step at a time. Let this calm story guide you to rest or simply deeper understanding. If you enjoy these quiet journeys through forgotten history, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It truly helps keep stories like this alive. Now, close your eyes, take a breath, and step into the world of the geisha. Chapter 1: The Woman in the Shadows. The rain had fallen gently on the stone streets of Kyoto, not enough to soak the ground, but just enough to blur the reflections of paper lanterns and silent footsteps. In the narrow alleys of Gion, sound travels differently, muted by wooden facades, by rice paper windows, and by centuries of restraint. A figure glided past the corner. Not walked, glided. Her steps were short, precise, never breaking rhythm. The fabric of her kimono whispered against the wet stone. A red umbrella tilted just enough to obscure her painted face. Those who saw her only caught a glimpse of white skin, lacquered hair, the faintest touch of perfume drifting behind. To most passers-by, she was a mystery, to others a memory. But to those who knew the traditions of this city, she was something else entirely. A geisha, a woman of art, of silence, of presence. Yet, how many truly understand what that word means? In the West, geisha has long been misunderstood, exoticized, romanticized, even vilified. She has been mistaken for a courtesan, a servant, a relic. But the truth is more difficult to grasp because it exists in layers of history, of ritual, of deliberate quiet. To understand the woman in the shadows, we must travel back in time. Before Gion became a postcard, before tourists with cameras lined up for a glimpse of silk and grace, before the myth, we must begin where all real stories begin, in the floating world. Ukiyo, the floating world. 17th century Japan was a time of isolation and transformation. Under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate, the country had sealed itself from foreign influence. The social order was rigid. The samurai ruled, the peasants labored, the merchants bargained, and the artisans crafted. But between the cracks of this controlled society, something else blossomed, a culture of escape, a pleasure, of beauty for beauty's sake. This was the Ukiyo, the floating world. The term described the entertainment districts of cities like Kyoto, Edo, now Tokyo, and Osaka. Within these bordered worlds, the outside rules bent. Actors performed kabuki in lavish costumes. Poets drank warm sake while composing haiku on the back of napkins. Musicians played shamisen under moonlit trees. And women, trained, poised, and sharp of wit, entertained powerful men not with their bodies, but with their art. At first, these women were not called geisha. In fact, the first geisha were men, performers, jesters, and musicians who appeared at parties to amuse elite guests. But as time passed, women began to take their place. They brought something new: elegance, refinement, and the deliberate concealment of emotion. By the late 1700s, female geisha had eclipsed their male counterparts completely. A new profession was born, not courtesans, artists. It's important to say this clearly. Geisha are not prostitutes. This misunderstanding comes from the West, particularly after World War II, when American soldiers encountered women in kimonos offering companionship in post-war Japan. Many of these women called themselves geisha girls, but they were not trained geisha. They were desperate, and the word had been misused. True geisha belong to an ancient tradition. Their job is to entertain, through conversation, dance, music, and presence. They are artists of atmosphere, experts in making you feel like the center of the world, without ever becoming the center themselves. Every gesture is calculated, every smile a choice, every pause a performance. A geisha does not speak loudly. She never interrupts. She listens more than she speaks. But when she speaks, it is always the exact right thing. She is not submissive. She is not seduced. She seduces without seduction, through intelligence, timing, humor, and poise. It is this paradox that makes the geisha so powerful and so invisible. The streets of Gion. To truly understand the life of a geisha, you must walk the streets she walks. In Gion, the oldest geisha district in Kyoto, the streets are narrow and paved with stones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The air carries a delicate blend of incense, tatami mat straw, and the distant scent of grilled fish from nearby stalls. Wooden buildings lean gently toward each other, their latticed facades weathered by time, their sliding doors whispering closed at dusk. This is not a place of loud signs or bright lights. It's a place of stillness, of anticipation. In the early evening, as lanterns are lit and the sun dips below the tiled rooftops, the streets come alive, not with noise, but with presence. Somewhere behind a bamboo screen, a shamisen begins to play, its three strings producing a sound that is somehow ancient and new at once. A small group of men, perhaps business owners or artists or diplomats, remove their shoes and bow as they enter a discreet okaya, a tea house. Inside, a fire flickers in a tiny hearth. Cushions are arranged around a lacquered table. There is laughter, but it is quiet, polite, measured. Moments later, she arrives, not with fanfare, not with applause, but with the silent authority of someone who owns the space with nothing but her presence. Her kimono may take an hour to put on. The layers, the silks, the colors, all chosen for balance and meaning. Her obi, the wide sash around her waist, is knotted in a way only Maiko, apprentice geisha, would wear, trailing behind her like a curtain. Her hair is real, styled in a shape that hasn't changed in centuries, decorated with seasonal ornaments. Cherry blossoms in April, maple leaves in November, snowflakes in January. And when she smiles, it is soft. It says, "I am here. This evening is yours." But also, "I am not yours." Becoming geisha, a path of devotion. No girl is born a geisha. The path begins young, sometimes as early as 15. A girl is often sent from a rural area to Kyoto by her family, where she joins an okiya, a geisha house. This is not a simple boarding home. It is a complex world with strict rules, obligations, and traditions. She becomes a shikomi, a servant. Her first months are spent cleaning, running errands, and observing. She wakes before sunrise, studies etiquette, learns the hierarchy of the house. Only after this period, and after passing tests in dance, music, and manners, is she allowed to become a Maiko, an apprentice. The Maiko years are both magical and grueling. She wears the most elaborate kimonos, the highest wooden sandals. She performs at banquets, attends rehearsals, memorizes centuries-old dances. She learns how to pour tea, how to fold a fan, how to adjust her gaze at the exact moment to show deference or confidence. Her name is given to her, often including a character from the older sister geisha who mentors her. This is not just symbolism. It is a contract. The older sister teaches her, guides her, corrects her, and in return, the younger owes loyalty and effort. The apprenticeship can last 5 years or more. Some girls never complete it. But those who do, those who endure the exhaustion, the discipline, the occasional loneliness, are welcomed into the full role of gaiko, the Kyoto word for geisha. And with that transformation comes something rare in traditional Japan. A woman who earns her own living, chooses her own clients, and walks the world without a husband, a master, or a family name. the illusion of freedom. But nothing is ever simple. Though geisha are independent in many ways, they exist within a fragile system of expectations. Every performance is booked through intermediaries. Every reputation must be protected. Scandal is not just career-ending. It can bring shame to an entire okiya, an entire district. A geisha is not allowed to fall in love openly. She cannot marry unless she retires. She may have patrons, dana, wealthy men who support her financially, often discreetly, sometimes for years. But even these relationships are defined by silence and tradition. Some geisha live well into old age without ever revealing their personal selves to anyone. Why do they continue? Because to them, being geisha is not a role. It is a calling. To be geisha is to live inside a poem, one written slowly, in brushstrokes and pauses, across the passing years. It is to master an art that vanishes as soon as it is expressed. A glance, a bow, a single movement of a fan. Voices behind the painted smile. When geisha speak, they do so carefully. But when they are alone, in diaries, in memoirs, in rare interviews, their voices reveal a depth not always visible in performance. One such voice was Miniko Iwasaki, a celebrated Kyoto geisha in the 1970s who eventually left the profession and spoke openly about her experience. Her life inspired parts of the novel Memoirs of a Geisha, though she distanced herself from its fiction. Miniko described the immense discipline required. Waking before dawn for dance practice, standing still for hours during fittings, maintaining composure even when exhausted or unwell. She spoke of beauty, yes, of how it felt to become art, but also of pain, of the pressure, the isolation, the misunderstandings. I wanted to live my own life, she wrote, and geisha life was not enough. And yet, she also defended the tradition. She believed in its dignity, its history, its power. Geisha are not trapped women. They are not broken birds. They are performers of silence, dancers of time. They exist on the edge of the visible world, seen, yet misunderstood. The economy of elegance. In modern economies, labor is measured by output, productivity, profit. But the world of geisha has always operated differently. Here, value is measured by presence, by the subtlety of a bow, the timing of a pause, the way a fan opens at precisely the right moment in a story. Training a geisha costs tens of thousands of dollars. Kimonos, often handmade and one-of-a-kind, can cost more than a car. Hairstyling, dance lessons, etiquette instructors, tea ceremony masters, all form part of an ecosystem that sustains this fragile art. Yet, for most geisha, the goal has never been wealth. It has been mastery, refinement, beauty pursued not for attention but for its own sake. Clients, usually older, powerful men, often pay large sums not for sex or favors, but for atmosphere, for the feeling of being transported to another time, for the idea that, just for a night, they are inside a perfect story. This is the quiet power of geisha. They turn the ordinary into something sacred. Cup of tea, question asked just right, a shared laugh, held in a moment of candlelight. These are the currencies they trade in, and their worth, while hard to measure, is impossible to fake. Modern shadows. Today, there are fewer than 1,000 active geisha in all of Japan. Their numbers have declined steadily since the 20th century, threatened by modernization, changing values, and the sheer cost of training. Many okiya have closed. Fewer girls apply. The world has moved faster, louder, and further from stillness. And yet they remain. In Kyoto, in Kanazawa, in Tokyo's Asakusa district, geisha still walk the stone alleys at dusk. They still attend banquets, still rehearse their dances, still live in houses that carry the weight of centuries. But the role is changing. Some geisha now post on social media cautiously, carefully. Some do interviews, host classes, even appear in documentaries. There is tension in this evolution. How do you preserve mystery in an age of transparency? How do you maintain ritual when the world demands access? And yet, like all true traditions, the geisha world adapts by returning to its core. Art, discipline, elegance in motion, a room with no clock. Let us imagine one last time a room in Gion. The rain has stopped. The floor is warm beneath a layer of tatami. Candlelight flickers across golden screens. A man sits quietly, sipping tea. He is not important, not in the usual sense. But in this room he is. Across from him sits a geisha. She is older than he expected. Her face carries time gracefully, not hidden by makeup, but framed by it. She listens as he speaks, laughs gently at the right moment, offers a second cup of tea without asking. Then, without warning, she begins to dance. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is slow, restrained, deliberate. Her sleeves flow like water. Her hands echo the shape of a crane in flight. Her eyes remain cast down, but her presence fills the room. There is no music, only the sound of her breath, the creak of the tatami beneath her feet. And in that moment, time ceases. There is no phone, no email, no agenda. There is only presence. There is only now. And this is the true gift of a geisha. Not seduction, not nostalgia, but presence. In a world that forgets how to pause, she reminds us. In a world that speaks too quickly, she listens. And when the evening ends, she bows once, gently, and disappears into the night, as if she had never been there at all. The woman in the shadows remembered. She will not be remembered for her name. Most geisha do not use their real names at all. She will not be found in history books, in museum wings, or on the front page. But she lives in the memory of those she met, in the way they remember silence, in the way they remember beauty not as spectacle, but as stillness. She is the woman in the shadows, the artist of fleeting things, the keeper of tradition in a world that forgets too quickly. Chapter 2: Apprentices and Rituals. The path to becoming a geisha does not begin with grace. It begins with silence, fatigue, and surrender. Before a young girl can wear the ornate kimono, before she can perform the subtle dances or recite elegant verses, she must disappear. Not literally, but socially. Her name, her clothes, her habits, all are stripped away. She arrives at the door of an okiya, a geisha house, with her suitcase and her uncertainty. And when the sliding door closes behind her, her old world ends. She is now a shikomi, the lowest level of the hierarchy, a trainee, a servant, a shadow, the house and the hierarchy. The okiya is not just a home. It is a training ground, a testing chamber, and a business. Inside, the structure is rigid. At the top is the okasan, literally mother, the matriarch of the house. She manages finances, bookings, and training. She is respected, feared, obeyed. Her decisions shape the lives of every girl under her roof. Next are the senior geisha, often called wani-san, older sisters. They are active performers, booked at okaya to entertain clients. Beneath them are the maiko, apprentice geisha, and then the shikomi. Each girl knows her place, not out of cruelty, but necessity. In a world where every glance, step, and syllable carries weight, hierarchy is clarity. The okiya runs like a clock. Meals are cooked, floors cleaned, appointments scheduled, kimono prepared. The youngest shikomi wakes first and sleeps last. She does laundry, carries tea, memorizes names. She is not expected to be elegant, not yet. Her first job is to observe and endure. Many do not last. Discipline before beauty. The idea of geisha life often conjures images of luxury, silk robes, music, admiration. But for a beginner, the reality is hard labor. A shikomi begins her day before dawn. She sweeps the stone walkway outside the okiya. She polishes wooden floors, scrubs the bath, and prepares breakfast for the household. Then, with barely a break, she attends classes, not just one, but many. Dance lessons require precise movement, often repeated for hours. A single misstep may be corrected a dozen times. Shamisen practice leaves her fingers blistered. Tea ceremony instruction demands perfection in silence. The way she folds a cloth, the angle of her wrist, the speed of her breath. Then come language and etiquette classes. Kyoto dialect is soft, formal, and nuanced. Every vowel elongated, every word chosen carefully. Speaking like a geisha is not natural. It is learned, honed, and controlled. By evening, she returns to the okiya and continues her chores. By night, she collapses onto a futon, usually in a shared room, and drifts into shallow sleep. There are no days off, no phones, no parties, only repetition, only structure. This life filters out the uncertain. It is not punishment, it is purification. The first step, becoming minarai. After months, or sometimes more than a year, the shikomi may be judged ready to advance. But advancement is not freedom. It is the first real test. She becomes a minarai literally, learning by watching. Now, she wears her first formal kimono. Her hair is styled professionally. She walks with the posture of a performer, but she does not yet entertain. Instead, she sits silently at the edge of banquets, observing the older geisha. She watches how they pour drinks, how they bow, how they respond to jokes with just the right laugh. She learns not by instruction, but by imitation. This stage is both thrilling and terrifying. For the first time, she enters the world of clients, but she cannot speak. She is beauty without voice, presence without power, the ceremony of naming. Before she can become a maiko, she must receive a new name. The naming ceremony, called misadashi, is one of the most sacred moments in a geisha's life. It marks her official debut into the Hanamachi, the geisha district. Invitations are sent. Patrons offer gifts. The girl kneels before her okasan and her older sister, who bestow upon her a new name. This name is never chosen randomly. It may carry a character from the one-san's name, symbolizing lineage. It may reflect a virtue, elegance, fragrance, light. It may echo the district's history. To outsiders, it may seem theatrical, but in truth, it is a severance. The girl becomes someone else, not to forget who she was, but to become who she must be. She will answer to this name for the rest of her career. She will sign it in calligraphy. She will hear it whispered as clients request her. It is not just a title. It is a vow. The maiko years, trial by beauty. Once she becomes a maiko, the young woman enters a new realm of discipline and of attention. Now she is seen, watched, admired, judged. She wears ornate kimono far more elaborate than those of full geisha. Their sleeves are longer, trailing gracefully. The patterns more vibrant. The obi wider and tied in the iconic darari musubi. A style so complex it requires professional help to secure. Every day, she is dressed by a kitsukeisher, a kimono dresser, because putting on her outfit alone would take hours. Her hair, now styled in elaborate traditional shapes, where shinobu for junior maiko, ofuku for senior ones, is her own, not a wig. And because of this, it must stay untouched for a week at a time. Sleeping on her back, on a wooden pillow that supports only her neck, becomes second nature. Pain too. Jewelry is forbidden. Makeup becomes her mask. The iconic white foundation, drawn eyebrows, red and black accents around the eyes, and red lips. Initially just the lower lip, a symbol of innocence and incompleteness. To outsiders, she seems glamorous. To herself, she is often exhausted. Sisterhood and silence. A Maiko is never alone, not in the way most girls are. She lives under the gaze of her Okasan, the geisha house mother. She follows the example of her Wanisan, the older sister assigned to mentor her. This woman, a senior geisha, becomes everything. Teacher, protector, judge. They perform together. The Maiko studies how her sister walks, how she plays shamisen, how she handles the smallest breach of etiquette. Mistakes are not punished with yelling. They are met with silence, or a slight frown, or the gentle correction of a hand on a shoulder. These gestures sting more than words. The Maiko is expected to serve her sister tea, carry her belongings, introduce her with proper language at events. But she is not a servant. She is an apprentice. And this apprenticeship is sacred. When the Wanisan sees that her charge is ready, she allows her to perform independently. But even then, their bond continues, one forged in hundreds of silent gestures, late-night advice, and shared secrets that will never be spoken aloud. The banquet as stage. A zashiki, a geisha banquet, is not a party. It is a theater. When a Maiko enters a room, all eyes turn. Not because she commands them, but because she carries the past with her. She bows low. Her sleeves nearly touch the floor. She speaks softly, not meekly, but gently. She pours sake with both hands. She listens more than she talks. Then the performance begins. It may be a dance, one choreographed centuries ago, handed down through generations, its steps echoing seasons or poetry. Each movement is symbolic. The flick of a wrist may represent falling cherry blossoms. A turn of the body might mirror the turning of a page. Or it may be a musical piece. Shamisen strings weeping gently, the lyrics drawn from old folk tales or Kyoto's winding history. Sometimes she recites verses, not performed as poetry, but spoken as memory. Clients are not drunk businessmen shouting requests. They are, at least for that hour, participants in ritual. They know their role. They laugh at the right moments. They respond with quiet appreciation. Sometimes they ask questions about the seasons, about Kyoto, about art, and the geisha or Maiko responds with grace and just enough wit. She is not there to seduce. She is there to elevate. And when the evening ends, she bows again, withdraws, and disappears into the night like a character from a dream. The rituals of the year. The life of a Maiko is not only divided by training, but by the seasons. Spring brings the Miyako Odori, the capital's grand dance, where dozens of geisha and Maiko perform for the public in Kyoto's theaters, celebrating the beauty of renewal. Their dances reflect cherry blossoms, first breezes, and love stories long faded. Summer brings festivals, lanternlit parades, temple visits, open-air banquets where Maiko appear in lighter kimono with seasonal motifs. Fireworks, dragonflies, waves. Autumn arrives with the leaf viewing parties, where Maiko entertain outdoors beneath brilliant red maples. Their dances grow more reflective, more subdued, echoing the passing of time, the withering of youth. Winter is the time of New Year's visits, where Maiko and geisha pay respect to their teachers, patrons, and fellow artists. Dressed in ceremonial kimono, they offer Nengejo, New Year's cards, share tea, and renew bonds. Every season shapes their routine. Every ritual reminds them, you are part of something larger. You are not just a woman, you are a bearer of time, doubt, fatigue, and the mirror. Not all Maiko finish their journey. Some leave after a year, exhausted by the schedule, the rules, the distance from family. Others fall in love, which is not forbidden but frowned upon. A relationship may lead to a scandal. A broken promise may bring shame to the Okiya. Most simply fade quietly, their names unspoken again. For those who stay, the struggle continues. Maiko are often lonely. They cannot text their friends. They cannot go to movies. They must bow to elders who sometimes do not see them as individuals. They must balance exhaustion with perfection, memory with creativity, formality with warmth. Each night, when they remove the heavy kimono, clean their face, and stare into the mirror, they see a version of themselves that is both more than human and less than free. Who am I under the paint? Will I ever laugh freely again? Will I still want this when I'm 30? These are questions that haunt even the most successful. But in the morning they rise again, and walk, and bow, and become geisha, not in a moment, but through 1,000 quiet choices. The graduation, Ariki. After 5 or more years as a Maiko, a young woman prepares for her final transformation. Ariki, the turning of the collar. It is a simple phrase, but it marks the most important transition in her career. She removes the red and white collar of the Maiko and dons the plain white collar of the Gaiko, a symbol of maturity, restraint, and elegance. Her hair will no longer be her own. She will wear a wig, styled daily. Her makeup becomes subtler, her movements more measured. The dances she performs now reflect deeper emotions: longing, sorrow, joy in memory rather than anticipation. With this change comes choice. She may continue to perform for decades. Some Gaiko retire in their 50s, 60s, even 70s. Or she may choose to leave, to marry, to travel, to teach. But wherever she goes, she will remain a geisha in the deepest sense. She will carry the walk, the gaze, the silence between gestures. These are things that do not fade. Chapter 3: Patrons, Power, and Secrets. In the softly lit tea rooms of Kyoto and Tokyo, where the clink of porcelain replaces conversation and the fragrance of incense hovers like memory, the geisha is never alone. She is accompanied not just by the echo of tradition, but by those who fund, support, and sometimes quietly control her path. The patrons. To the outsider, the role of a patron may seem transactional. A wealthy man funds a geisha's career in exchange for exclusive companionship. But the reality, like everything in the Hanamachi, is more complex, more layered, more silent. It is a relationship shaped not by possession, but by presence. Not by demand, but by mutual illusion. And within that illusion, immense power sometimes flows. The Dana, more than a sponsor. In geisha culture, the most well-known term for a patron is Dana, a title that carries prestige, responsibility, and ambiguity. A Dana is not simply a client. He is a financial guardian. He may pay for a geisha's kimono, shamisen lessons, or the monthly fees to the Okiya. He may fund the opening of her own independent house once she becomes successful. He might provide her a second residence, separate from her Okiya, where she may rest or entertain. In return, he receives what exactly? Not always love, not always intimacy, certainly not ownership. He receives access to her time, to her thoughts, to the quiet space where art and intimacy blur. He becomes part of her circle, and she part of his legend. It is said that a true Dana asks for nothing, and in doing so is granted everything. Power in politeness. In feudal Japan, patronage was often the domain of daimyo, regional lords, military leaders, men who dealt in swords and land. By the 19th century, these roles were filled by zaibatsu tycoons, cabinet ministers, and literary icons. In the 20th century, patrons included CEOs of shipping companies, editors of major newspapers, and visiting generals from abroad. They came to the geisha district not for escape, but for influence. The Hanamachi was a neutral ground, a place where politics, business, and scandal could be discussed behind sliding doors. In the Okaya, men could speak plainly, shielded by ritual and sake. Geisha were never passive observers. They listened, they remembered, and sometimes they redirected. It is not documented in official records, but it is whispered in memoirs that a geisha once helped delay a merger by misdirecting a conversation over dinner, that another convinced a military officer to reconsider a stationing decision, that yet another shielded a famous writer's political leanings by serving as his public distraction. To be a geisha was not to be powerless. It was to be dangerously well-informed and to never be caught acting on it. The rules of discretion, despite their proximity to the powerful, geisha are bound by one unspoken law stronger than any contract: silence. They do not name names. They do not repeat what they hear. They do not confirm rumors, not even with a glance. This discretion is what separates them from other forms of entertainers. It is why a CEO may request the same geisha every New Year's Eve for decades. Why a former prime minister may still send flowers to the house of a retired geisha every spring. In a world that leaks, the geisha holds water. When power fails, not every patronage is dignified. Some men, emboldened by wealth or ignorance, have tried to turn the relationship transactional. They offer cars, foreign vacations, large gifts, expecting obedience or exclusivity in return. But the geisha world, while accommodating, is not submissive. A geisha may accept a gift, smile sweetly, and never see the man again. She may turn away and offer with a laugh or with silence. She may call upon her okasan to intervene, and in most cases the house will protect her. There have been scandals. One Tokyo geisha was once accused of manipulating a politician's spending. The tabloids circled, the patrons disappeared, but the Hanamachi closed ranks. She left for Kyoto, and years later, she reappeared, not disgraced, but evolved. This too is part of the tradition. Reinvention through endurance, silence as survival, the invisible web. Each patronage leaves threads behind. Some geisha keep letters, bound in ribbon, hidden in drawers, reread on rainy days. Some keep fans with inscriptions, or books signed by authors who once loved them. Some keep nothing at all, trusting memory over material. And yet, the relationships shape them. A geisha may learn how to read contracts because a banker taught her. She may develop opinions on foreign policy because a diplomat shared them over tea. She may begin to write poetry in private, inspired by a writer who saw her not just as a performer, but as a mirror. In this way, the geisha evolves not through lessons, but through presence. She is educated by the powerful, but she also educates them. Echoes of history, legendary patrons. Among the records of the Hanamachi, often written in fading ink, bound in quiet memoirs, or whispered among retired geisha, live the stories of extraordinary patronages. There was Count Sayonji, a nobleman from Kyoto's elite in the early 20th century, known not only for his elegance but his philosophical debates. He was said to have sponsored a geisha named Katsuno, not because of her beauty, but because of her mind. Their evenings were not filled with music, but with readings from Confucius, arguments over European literature, and long silences broken only by a bell's chime for tea. Katsuno later became a mentor to younger geisha, and her house became known for producing the most eloquent speakers in Gion. Then there was Matsuura Takanobu, an industrialist who supported multiple geisha, openly and simultaneously. Rather than secrecy, he offered stability and education. He created a fund for the daughters of geisha, so they might attend school instead of being pressured into the trade. Though criticized by some, he was revered in Kyoto's inner circles. When he died, nearly every geisha house in the district sent a handwritten condolence letter to his widow. Perhaps the most whispered story, though, is of Shiozaki, a high-ranking naval officer during the Pacific War. He visited the same geisha every time he returned from deployment. He never asked for favors. He never gave lavish gifts. Only a single folding fan, signed each year with the date and a cherry blossom sketch. After the war, he vanished, presumed dead. Decades later, a visitor from America came to Gion, carrying a small box. Inside was the same fan, dated 1945, never delivered. The geisha, now retired, cried only once. Then she served tea and returned to her silence, entanglements and emotional ties. While many relationships between geisha and their patrons remain symbolic or formal, some became deeply personal, even romantic. But unlike the modern world, where relationships are marked by directness, these entanglements lived in the gray. A patron might visit weekly, bring gifts, stay for hours, and yet never speak of love. A geisha might reply with poetry, with dance, with the gift of her presence, but never name the feeling. And yet, emotions bloomed. For the geisha, these feelings could be dangerous. Attachment might lead to distraction, jealousy, or worse, to compromising her independence. For some, the choice became stark: continue serving or retire to marry. Some chose love. Many chose the art. There are stories of heartbreak, though they are told without drama. A geisha receiving a wedding invitation from a former Dana, sent with the same handwriting that once addressed her as dearest. A geisha declining a final banquet because she could not bear to see him leave. But more often, the emotions were absorbed into the performance. Grief became a deeper song. Longing became a subtler bow. And so the client never knew, or perhaps always did. Money, morality, and myth, popular culture, both inside Japan and abroad, often imagines the geisha's patronage as transactional or even exploitative. But within the community, such assumptions are not only misleading, they are seen as disrespectful. Geisha did and do require financial support. The costs of kimono, training, housing, and performance are immense. A single formal kimono may cost more than a small car. Lessons in shamisen or dance continue for years, often for life. In this, the patron is not a buyer. He is a sponsor of art. Just as opera houses have benefactors, so too do geisha. This is not to deny that some Dana crossed lines. There were men who tried to control, who sought exclusivity without understanding the rules, who whispered threats behind closed screens. But the Hanamachi is not defenseless. Okiya mothers, older sisters, and even rival geisha have removed problematic patrons through quiet resistance. Appointments mysteriously vanish. Invitations dry up. A particular geisha is always already booked, and slowly the unwelcome guest fades. The geisha world does not confront. It withholds, forgets, the disappearance of the Dana. By the late 20th century, Japan changed. The economy boomed. Cities modernized. Feminism rose. And with it, the role of the patron began to disappear. Few men today are willing or able to assume the long-term financial and social obligations of being a Dana. The new business elite no longer frequent tea houses. They network in skyscraper lounges, on golf courses, or through smartphones. Many geisha now work without patrons. They support themselves through multiple bookings, teaching, or running cultural workshops for tourists. The relationship with the client becomes briefer, elegant, but fleeting. Some see this as liberation, others as loss. Without the deep bonds of patronage, some geisha feel adrift, lacking that one person who believed in them not for a night, but for a career. Some okiya no longer train apprentices at all, unable to afford the years of unprofitable mentorship. And yet, the tradition endures, because every so often, a man appears, quiet, respectful, generous not just with money but with time, and offers to help a geisha build something greater. And she, cautious, proud, and unhurried, may one day call him Dana. Legacy in letters. In a small wooden drawer in an old okia, wrapped in silk and cedar, lie dozens of letters. They are not contracts. They are not love notes. They are fragments of connection. Some are written in brush calligraphy, others in fountain pen. Some begin with formality, others with shared jokes. A few are unsigned, meant only for the reader's eyes. They speak of weather, of memories, of regrets. One simply says, "You once poured me tea when I thought the world would fall apart." That was enough. These letters are never displayed. They are never sold. But when the geisha grows old, when she can no longer dance or sing, she sometimes opens them and remembers who helped her become who she was. The power behind the screen. If there is a secret to the power of geisha-patron relationships, it is this: they live behind the screen, behind the fan, behind the glance that lingers 1 second longer than it should. These relationships are built not on clarity, but on tension, not on possession, but on invitation. They are stories told in gesture, where a single nod can mean a promise, and silence can mean goodbye. And though most of their names never enter history books, the patrons shaped the art of geisha just as surely as the women did. For every famous dance, there was a man who funded the stage. For every legendary geisha, there was someone who believed in her before anyone else. But like all things in the geisha world, this power is never spoken. It is felt, it is remembered, and then, like incense, it fades. Chapter 4: War and Silence. History rarely asks the artist for permission. It reshapes their world, their purpose, and their audience. For geisha, war did not only threaten their bodies or homes, it challenged the very idea of beauty, ceremony, and stillness in a world that demanded speed, loyalty, and destruction. Yet in each era of upheaval they remained, not unchanged but unyielded. This is the story of how geisha endured war, not by fighting but by remembering, not through confrontation but through silence. The Meiji era, Western wins. The Meiji Restoration of 1868 marked the end of Japan's feudal age. The emperor was restored to power, the samurai class abolished, and the country opened itself, reluctantly, to the West. Suddenly, everything traditional was under scrutiny. Men shaved their topknots. Women shortened their sleeves. Railroads, gaslights, and foreign suits arrived like thunder. And amid the storm of modernity, many assumed the geisha, so deeply rooted in old etiquette and custom, would fade away. They did not. In fact, geisha adapted faster than most. In cities like Tokyo and Kyoto, they began learning Western instruments: piano, violin, even opera. Some added French and English phrases to their language lessons. Others reimagined traditional dances to accommodate new audiences. Foreign diplomats, businessmen, and newspaper reporters hungry for a glimpse of old Japan. While many traditionalists scoffed, the geisha understood something deeper. To preserve beauty, one must allow it to evolve. Still, beneath the new sounds and curious visitors, something fragile was happening. Many geisha houses closed, unable to afford the shift. Younger women began choosing factory work or modern marriages over art. The hanamachi, once exclusive worlds of elegance, began shrinking. But those who remained learned to walk the narrow line between history and survival. Into fire the Second World War. By the 1930s, Japan stood on the edge of militarism. National pride turned to propaganda. Civilians were told to serve through sacrifice, even in beauty. Geisha were now encouraged to support the state. In some districts, they were enlisted to entertain military officers or visiting bureaucrats. Performances shifted. Dances became more nationalistic, music more rigid. Patriotic songs replaced romantic poetry. Even makeup styles adapted, lips painted smaller, more austere, less suggestive. Behind the folding screens, however, the tone was different. Many geisha resented being used for morale. Some whispered criticisms behind fans. Others offered private comfort to men about to leave for Manchuria, not as celebration, but as mourning in advance. In major cities, bombing raids loomed. Kyoto was largely spared, thanks in part to its cultural status, but Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya suffered immense destruction. Geisha houses were burned, records lost, families scattered. In some cases, Okiya mothers took in war orphans, sheltering them under the same roofs that had once hosted poetry recitals. Apprentice training stopped. Clients disappeared. The silence of the Hanamachi deepened, no longer elegant, but grief-stricken. And yet, geisha continued to wear their kimono each morning. They lit incense. They practiced shamisen, because to stop would have been to concede. And beauty, especially in wartime, became resistance, occupation, and misunderstanding. In 1945, when the emperor surrendered and American soldiers poured into Japan, a new confusion arose, one that still haunts the image of the geisha today. Some Japanese women, desperate for food, shelter, or security, turned to sex work with occupying soldiers. They were often called pan-pan girls, a term that would later blur dangerously with the image of geisha. American soldiers, unfamiliar with geisha culture, used the term loosely. To them, any kimono-clad woman offering companionship, even if just pouring a drink, was a geisha. Hollywood films later cemented this confusion, portraying geisha as courtesans or concubines. This misunderstanding devastated the Hanamachi. For generations, geisha had trained not in seduction, but in restraint. Now, their name was associated with survival prostitution, their honor publicly questioned. To counter this, some geisha districts held open events for journalists and diplomats, inviting them to witness the training, the artistry, the rituals. They explained gently but firmly the difference between geisha and sex workers. Some listened, most did not. The damage was slow to repair. Economy of survival. The end of World War II did not mean immediate peace. It meant scarcity. With much of Japan's infrastructure in ruins and the economy devastated, the luxury world of geisha became nearly impossible to sustain. Patrons had lost fortunes, businesses had collapsed, and tea houses stood empty. Many okiya, unable to afford rice or fuel, closed forever. Some geisha returned to their family homes. Others took on work as seamstresses or housekeepers, vowing to return once they could. A few transitioned into the modern world, working as typists, translators, or stage actresses. But a small number stayed. They worked not for profit, but for memory. In Kyoto, a geisha named Taimi continued to perform for no fee. She believed that each time she danced, she reminded her country of its past. A version of Japan not defined by surrender or rubble, but by elegance and form. Another, in Kanazawa, taught war widows how to dress in kimono again, not for beauty but for dignity. Even a woman in mourning, she said, can walk with grace. Stories etched in silence. Few geisha wrote memoirs in the post-war years. Not because they had nothing to say, but because they had too much. To speak of wartime was to betray the rule of silence. To name names, to recall private conversations, to record which officials cried in their laps the night before a battle. All of this would violate the centuries-old code of discretion. Instead, their memories became movement. A certain twist of the wrist in a dance might hold a story no one else knew. A particular pause between notes on the shamisen might reflect a night spent watching fires consume their neighborhood. In this way, geisha became living archives, history in motion, preserved without paper. And yet, among themselves, the stories were shared. An apprentice would hear of the night her Okasan hid wounded soldiers in the back room. Another might learn that her elder sister once performed a private farewell for an entire battalion, none of whom returned. These stories were never dramatized. They were spoken slowly, always ending in, "And then we served tea," rebirth through ritual. In the 1950s, as Japan rebuilt itself, the Hanamachi faced a question. Could beauty survive modernity again? Many believed it couldn't. TV had arrived. Western fashion flooded the streets. Young women wanted jeans, jobs, and freedom. Not hours of dance rehearsals, calligraphy practice, or silent meals with aging men. And yet, Kyoto's Gion district, Tokyo's Shinbashi, and Kanazawa's Kasumimachi began to revive. Tourists arrived, first domestic, then foreign, and many longed to glimpse the old Japan, now vanishing. The Japanese government, eager to preserve national identity, began subsidizing traditional arts, including geisha performance. Universities invited geisha to lecture on etiquette and cultural preservation. Fashion houses sought inspiration from kimono. The result wasn't a return, but a transformation. The geisha of the 1950s and 60s were not replicas of the past. They were survivors, carrying trauma in perfectly folded sleeves. They had seen war, hunger, and shame, and yet danced as if untouched. That contradiction became their power. Legacy of resistance. When we think of resistance, we think of protest, defiance, perhaps even rebellion. But for geisha, resistance was quieter. It was choosing to recite a 200-year-old poem on a rooftop during a blackout. It was refusing to compromise one's craft even when no one was watching. It was serving sake with precision, even when surrounded by chaos. In this silence, there was strength, because the world wanted the geisha to vanish irrelevant, outdated, fragile. But she did not. Instead, she adjusted her collar, painted her lips in ritual, and waited, unwritten history. Today, few official war records mention the role of geisha. They are footnotes, if that. But if you ask the elders in the Hanamachi, they will tell you, it was the geisha who kept the spirit of Japan alive. Not through speeches or slogans, but through stillness. When all else was broken, they performed. Not for applause, but for memory. Their war was not on the battlefield. It was in the okiya, the okaya, the mind. And when it ended, they did not ask for recognition, only for space, to continue. Today's silence. The post-war generation of geisha is now nearly gone. Many of them never told their full stories. Some had no children to pass their legacy to. Others believed the beauty of their era could never be translated. But in every performance today, in every fan snap, footstep, or smile, a sliver of that history lives. Young Maiko learned songs composed during the war. Older geisha may still wear obi gifted by soldiers who never returned. And though no one speaks of it aloud, everyone in the room feels it. The past is here, not loudly, but deeply. Chapter 5, The Flower and the Brand. The geisha, once an artist of silence and ritual, is now a subject of postcards, documentaries, and filtered Instagram posts. Her name is known in every corner of the globe, even if it is not always understood. She is photographed, imitated, and marketed. She is a symbol, a curiosity, a souvenir, and yet, she still walks the streets of Kyoto in quiet grace, unaffected on the surface, but deeply aware. This is the story of how the geisha became a brand, not by choice, but by necessity. The tourist's gaze. It began quietly. In the post-war years, Japan became a place of fascination for the West. The image of cherry blossoms, temples, calligraphy, and especially the geisha began appearing in travel books and magazines. Tourists came seeking the old Japan, a country unspoiled by modernity, wrapped in elegance and mystery. In Kyoto, the Hanamachi began to adapt. Tea houses opened cultural experiences where guests, often foreign, could watch geisha perform dances or serve tea in a controlled, time-boxed environment. These were not full banquets or long nights of conversation. They were shows, curated, polite, and often oversimplified. To the visitor, it was magical. To the geisha, it was practical. The money helped sustain the arts, but the intimacy was gone. Instead of building long relationships with patrons who understood nuance, many geisha found themselves smiling for photos, answering the same questions over and over. Are you like memoirs of a geisha? Do you live here? Can I try on your kimono? Some handled it with humor, others with quiet resignation. It was not wrong, only incomplete. Memoirs and misconceptions. In 1997, Arthur Golden's novel Memoirs of a Geisha exploded onto the international stage. A lush, romanticized tale of a young girl's transformation into a famous geisha, it became a bestseller, and, later, a Hollywood film. To the world, it was an invitation into a secret world. To many geisha, it was a misrepresentation. The book, while beautifully written, blurred too many lines, especially between geisha and sex work. It suggested that geisha were sold, manipulated, and ultimately dependent on male validation. For actual geisha, women who trained for years in art, who carefully preserved their independence and boundaries, this portrayal was not only inaccurate but damaging. Tourists began arriving in droves, asking inappropriate questions. Some even assumed they could hire a geisha for personal companionship. The Hanamachi responded with discretion, but internally, frustration simmered. One geisha wrote in her diary, "I serve tea, I dance, I remember poetry from a century ago, but they only ask me if I've been bought." The camera and the kimono. By the 2010s, smartphones became omnipresent. Social media exploded, and with it, the geisha became more visible than ever, often against her will. In Kyoto's Gion district, Maiko were followed down alleyways by crowds of tourists, cameras held high, snapping photos without permission. Some visitors mistook them for performers in costume. Others chased them for selfies. What was once a sacred walk from Okiya to tea house became a public spectacle. In 2019, local authorities in Kyoto posted signs forbidding photography in certain alleys. Fines were introduced. Okiya mothers pleaded for respect. Some geisha began wearing more subtle hairstyles or traveling by taxi to avoid attention. Others embraced the moment cautiously. A few geisha began participating in government-sponsored tourism videos, carefully narrating their day-to-day lives, correcting misconceptions with calm authority. These videos were watched millions of times, and while some viewers came seeking exoticism, many walked away with deeper respect. Still, the question remained, how do you remain authentic when the world is watching and expecting a fantasy? Cultural commodification. As Japan's economy globalized, so too did its cultural exports. Anime, sushi, Zen gardens all became international icons. The geisha, too, became part of this soft power. Businesses began using geisha imagery in marketing. Perfumes with geisha on the label. Fashion brands using kimono-inspired patterns. Even video games with cartoon Maiko as characters. Sometimes this was done with care. Other times it felt like theft. Within Japan, there was debate. Some argued that increased visibility helped preserve geisha culture, bringing money, interest, and new apprentices. Others believed it diluted the meaning, reducing centuries of tradition into costume and stereotype. One elder geisha, in a rare interview, said, "They take our image, but not our effort." And yet, branding was not entirely external. Some geisha houses began hosting websites. They accepted bookings online, posted professional portraits, and even offered English-language experiences. Survival required adaptation, but each choice came with a cost. Walking the line. Today, the geisha stands at a crossroads. On one side, authenticity, the quiet, slow, demanding world of art, ritual, and seasonal rhythm. On the other, modernity, fast, visible, monetized, digital. Some geisha choose retreat. They serve only longtime clients, reject cameras, and live as their mentors once did. Others experiment using YouTube, podcasts, or Instagram to share their life, explain etiquette, and debunk myths. They are not selling themselves, but storytelling. Education, they believe, is the best form of preservation. The line between art and brand is not clear, and perhaps it never was. But in this tension, between flower and logo, between fan and lens, the geisha continues, not as a relic, but as a symbol that grows without rushing. Modern faces, ancient names. Meet Sayaka, a Gaiko, fully-fledged geisha, in Kyoto, barely 30 years old. Each morning, she practices shamisen and classical dance. Each evening, she dresses in kimono stitched by her grandmother's hand. But between appointments, she posts stories on Instagram, in Japanese and English, about tea rituals, poetry, and seasonal hairpins. Her audience, 80,000 followers. Her goal, clarity, not fame. "I do not want people to worship geisha," she once said in a live stream. "I want them to understand us, because misunderstanding leads to erasure." Sayaka is one of a new generation, geisha who are literate in both tradition and technology. They see platforms not as threats, but as tools. Where their predecessors guarded their silence, they share carefully chosen truths. What it means to learn humility at 15, the pain of folding one's ambitions into etiquette, the power of walking slowly in a world that sprints. And yet, not all approve. Some elders warn that this visibility makes geisha too accessible. They worry that mystery is part of the art, and that the brand might overtake the flower. But Sayaka disagrees. "We are not ghosts. We are women, and we are still becoming." The cost of visibility. Of course, not all stories are triumphs. Some geisha have found themselves criticized, misunderstood, or even harassed online. A Maiko in Tokyo was once outed for dating a university student, something not forbidden, but frowned upon by tradition. The story went viral, and within weeks, she quietly left her okiya. Another geisha received death threats for appearing on a talk show, where she spoke candidly about her struggles with depression. In the past, such stories would have never left the Hanamachi. Now, the internet remembers everything. This is the danger of becoming a brand. You are seen not as a person, but as a product. Geisha, who once thrived on subtlety, now must learn digital boundaries. What to show, what to protect, how to remain whole while constantly being watched. Some withdraw, others adapt, but no one remains untouched. Teaching the future. Despite the complexities, the geisha tradition is not dying. It is being taught anew. In Kyoto, apprenticeships continue, though fewer girls apply each year. The training remains rigorous. Dance, tea, music, walking, dialect, silence. But alongside the old are new lessons. How to navigate interviews without losing dignity. How to maintain a private life in a digital age. How to correct a tourist gently without alienation. How to be modern without being empty. Some okiya even hire media consultants or translators. Not to sell out, but to survive. After all, if no one knows the difference between a real geisha and a costume, then the tradition will vanish, not from failure, but from fiction. The goal now is awareness with accuracy, to be visible and respected, to exist beyond the brand, but not against it. The flower reclaims itself. The word geisha means artist, not hostess, not servant, not symbol, just artist. And in that word lies everything. The dance learned over years, the music played in trembling silence, the rituals passed from woman to woman, without applause, without explanation. To be a geisha today is to choose a life that resists speed. It is to know the cost of attention and still stand up straight. It is to speak softly and still be heard. The flower of the Hanamachi has not wilted. It has grown new roots, some of them digital, some branded, but deep beneath the surface, the art remains. Closing the fan. In a world obsessed with exposure, the geisha reminds us of something else. That mystery, too, is a kind of power. That not all traditions must become performances. And that beauty is not weakened by change, only revealed. So the next time someone shows you a postcard or a TikTok or a novel and calls it the world of the geisha, ask yourself, who created that image? And what do they want you to believe? Then, if you're lucky, you might someday find yourself in a quiet tea house, watching a woman in perfect silence pour tea, her sleeve catching candlelight, her eyes meeting yours, and knowing the truth lives here, not in the story, but in the stillness between. Chapter 6: Shadows and Scandals. Every tradition has its shadows, even the most refined, even the most beautiful. The world of the geisha is no exception. Behind the silken screens and the ceremonial smiles, there have been secrets, sometimes whispered, sometimes hidden in plain sight. Over centuries, these women have lived alongside power, wealth, and politics. That proximity brought prestige. It also brought danger. This chapter is not a tabloid. It is not here to sensationalize or shame. But to understand the full truth of the geisha tradition, we must look into the corners, the parts less photographed, less spoken of, but no less real. Whispers in the Okaya. In the pre-war decades, the most exclusive tea houses, Okaya, were not only places for entertainment. They were places of negotiation. Business deals were sealed between courses of kaiseki. Government alliances were discussed in the quiet after a shamisen performance. Generals relaxed their guard. Ministers confided. And the geisha? She was not just decoration. She listened. She remembered. She understood when to speak and when never to repeat. But sometimes that silence made her complicit. Sometimes it was weaponized against her. There are stories, rarely told aloud, of young Maiko pressured into relationships with powerful men under the guise of favor or sponsorship. While not a standard practice, it happened, especially in eras when women had fewer protections. Some okiya discouraged it. Others silently endorsed it, because a wealthy patron could mean survival, patrons, and possession. The traditional patronage system, known as dana, was once considered honorable. A dana was a man, usually older and wealthy, who supported a geisha's artistic life. He might pay for her kimono, her lessons, or her okiya's expenses. In return, she might offer companionship, not necessarily romantic, but deeply personal. It was a relationship of mutual benefit, and often mutual respect, but not always. Some danas believed that money meant control. That support entitled them to more than performance, to exclusivity, to intimacy, to obedience. And in some eras, society agreed. For a young geisha, declining such advances could mean financial ruin, or worse, ostracization from her community. There are historical records of geisha who disappeared from their hanamachi after refusing a powerful client. Others were quietly retired when a scandal threatened a political reputation. The The rules of power were unspoken but heavy, and often the geisha bore the cost, the price of exposure. With the rise of journalism in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, geisha began appearing in newspapers, not as cultural figures, but as subjects of scandal. One famous case involved a Tokyo geisha named Katsumi, who was allegedly involved in a love affair with a married cabinet minister. When the affair became public, the minister resigned in disgrace. But Katsumi, who had once been revered for her poetry and performance, found herself banned from major tea houses. Clients avoided her. She died in obscurity. Her only crime was being named. The press did not forgive, and neither did society. In another instance, a Kyoto geisha was falsely accused of espionage during the 1930s. Her only offense was entertaining a foreign guest too often. The military police investigated her okiya, and although she was cleared, her reputation never recovered. From these stories, a lesson spread. Visibility was danger. Better to serve in silence than to become a headline. Better to be forgotten than misunderstood. The line between art and flesh, perhaps the most persistent misunderstanding then and now, is the conflation of geisha with prostitution. This confusion stems in part from history. In Edo period Japan, geisha and courtesans, oiran, often lived and worked in close quarters, though their roles were distinct. Geisha were entertainers, oiran were companions, but outsiders, particularly foreigners, often could not tell the difference. After World War II, the term geisha girl was used by American soldiers to describe local women, many of whom were not trained in arts at all, but worked in clubs and bars near military bases. This terminology damaged the geisha image for decades, and even within Japan there were gray areas. Some struggling okiya, especially outside the major cities, allowed or encouraged their geisha to accept sexual offers in desperate times. Not officially, not proudly, but quietly. This was not the norm, and many geisha fiercely protected their autonomy. But these stories, real or rumored, blurred the public's understanding. To this day, many geisha must still explain, "I am not for sale," even when wearing the most sacred garments of their tradition, breaking the silence. In the 2000s, a former geisha named Miniko Iwasaki broke an unspoken rule. She spoke publicly. She had been one of the most famous geisha in Kyoto in the 1970s, serving royalty and international celebrities. She retired young and lived in private peace, until she discovered that Arthur Golden had interviewed her for his novel Memoirs of a Geisha and included elements of her life without permission. She sued, and she wrote her own memoir. Her book, Geisha, A Life, became a counterpoint to the Western narrative. She clarified the role of geisha. She denounced the sexual myths. She reminded the world that being a geisha was not a curse, but a calling. Her decision was controversial. Some praised her bravery. Others in the Hanamachi called it a betrayal, because in geisha culture, silence is sacred. But Miniko believed that truth was worth the breach, to be seen and still misunderstood. Even now, in the 21st century, scandals still emerge. A Maiko caught smoking outside her okiya. A geisha accepting private clients outside protocol. Photos leaked. Videos uploaded. Reputations ruined by misunderstanding or malice or mistakes. The Hanamachi is not immune to the world's pressures. And the geisha, for all her elegance, is not immune to being human. She may stumble. She may rebel. She may want more than the path offers. Some leave. Some write books. Some vanish entirely, changing names and cities. And yet, even with all this, the tradition holds. Not because it is flawless, but because it acknowledges flaw with grace. Between honor and survival. In every generation, geisha have faced a dilemma. How much of themselves to give? not just in art but in life. They are trained to serve, to anticipate, to create peace in a room. But what happens when the line between service and submission blurs? When a powerful client asks too much? Or when an Okia's future depends on keeping him happy? Some geisha obeyed, believing it was the cost of continuity. Others resisted, risking expulsion. These choices were rarely public. They lived in whispers and looks, in absences and substitutions. A Maiko disappeared from the dance program. A Gaiko moved home and never returned. The Hanamachi didn't explain. It adjusted. Behind the beauty of the geisha world lies an undeniable fact. It has always been shaped by men's money. And so, the women within it have learned to walk a tightrope, honoring their art while navigating the desires of those who pay for it. Some found balance. Some fell. Reform from within. In recent decades, a quiet revolution has begun. Some Okiya have rewritten their contracts to forbid any romantic or sexual relationship between their geisha and clients. Others have banned the dana system entirely, choosing independence over reliance. Young geisha now attend workshops on workplace harassment and power dynamics. Some even study law or public relations during their apprenticeship, preparing not just for banquets but for interviews, misunderstandings, and moments of pressure. Mentorship has changed, too. Where once an elder might say, "Don't ask questions, just smile," now she might say, "You don't have to smile if it's hurting you." This is not universal. Some houses cling to the old ways, fearful of losing what makes them special. But the direction is clear. Geisha are claiming more agency, not by abandoning their tradition, but by reshaping its framework. The art remains, but the silence no longer means surrender. Those who left, there have always been geisha who walked away. Some did so quietly, marrying or starting new careers. Others did so loudly, writing books, giving interviews, challenging assumptions. Their stories vary. One former Gaiko became a university professor, teaching gender studies with a focus on performative identity. Another became a lawyer for women's rights, citing her years in the Hanamachi as a lesson in power and negotiation. One woman, now in her 60s, runs a support group for former apprentices who left under pressure or abuse. They are not fallen. They are freed but still marked by their past. Some speak of the beauty they miss, the music, the sisterhood, the rhythm of the seasons. Others only mention control, fear, and erasure. And some still wear their old kimono in private, alone, remembering who they were when the music played. The ethics of looking. As outsiders, we must ask, what is our role in these stories? When we watch a geisha perform, are we appreciating or consuming? When we read about scandals, are we curious or complicit? There is a difference between learning and peering, between honoring a tradition and exploiting it for spectacle. Geisha have long been mirrors, reflecting what the world wants to see. Sometimes they are the ideal of beauty, sometimes the stereotype of submission, sometimes the cautionary tale. But they are also people. And when we forget that, we contribute to the very shadows we claim to uncover. Resilience beyond the scandal. For all its secrets and scars, the world of the geisha endures. It endures because it is not built solely on glamour, but on discipline. Because it survives scandal with silence and thrives through evolution. Today's geisha are no longer invisible. They give interviews. They write essays. They consult with cultural ministries and film studios to correct portrayals. Some teach workshops for young girls on posture, presence, and confidence, not to recruit, but to share the wisdom of centuries. They are not fragile. They are formidable, not despite the scandals, but because of what they survived. Closing the chapter. In the end, every tradition is both light and shadow. The geisha world is no different. There have been abuses, There have been sacrifices. There have been moments when the flower wilted and the brand outshone the woman. But there has also been strength in the silence that protected dignity, in the choices that resisted power, in the women who stayed and the ones who left. To know the geisha fully, we must see her not just in performance, but in contradiction. Not just in elegance, but in endurance. Because beneath the makeup, the silk, and the smile, there is always a woman, and her story deserves to be seen whole. Chapter 7, Seasons and Symbols. To live as a geisha is to live by the rhythm of the seasons. She is not governed by clocks or calendars, but by plum blossoms, by crickets, by wind. Her world moves in circles, soft, cyclical, deliberate. Where others rush, she notices. Where others forget, she remembers. Each season changes her hair, her kimono, her dance, her tea, her scent. To understand the geisha, one must understand time, not as minutes, but as meanings. Spring, the promise of becoming. Spring begins before it is seen, before the plum blossoms open, before the cherry trees explode in pale pink joy. It begins in the quiet swelling of buds, the shift in sunlight, the first breeze that no longer bites. In this season, the maiko blooms. For many apprentices, spring is the start of their debut. They enter the hanamachi with new names, new hair, new shoes too stiff to walk in. Their white collars are red-trimmed, a mark of beginning. Their voices are soft, but their laughter is quick. They do not yet move like water, but they will. In spring, dances are light. Haru no umi, spring sea, with flowing sleeves like waves. Sakura, performed beneath real blossoms, where petals fall on the shamisen. Hair ornaments, kanzashi shimmer with cherry, plum, and butterfly motifs. Kimono are pale, hopeful, often with embroidered new shoots or baby birds. Spring for the geisha is not youth. It is arrival. The world wakes up, and so does she. Summer, the season of restraint. If spring is generous, summer is disciplined. Japan's summer is hot, humid, relentless. A geisha must appear untouched by the heat, composed, cool, a breeze made flesh. To achieve this illusion requires effort. Kimono shift to haito unlined for breathability. Colors become lighter. Soft blues, watery greens, silver. Hair is pinned higher with fans tucked gracefully at the waist. Dance becomes more restrained. Movements are minimal, refined. The goal is not to mirror the sun, but to temper it. Guests are offered cool tea or shaved ice in delicate bowls. Conversations stay light, like wind chimes in the distance. Maiko wear morning glory or willow in their kanzashi, symbols of elegance and impermanence. In summer, the geisha does not compete with the heat. She absorbs it and becomes something else. A still pond, a shaded path, a moment of peace. Autumn, the season of depth. Autumn arrives not with sound, but with scent. The first firewood, the faint smoke in distant mountains, the sweetness of roasted chestnuts. Geisha love autumn. It is the most poetic of seasons, the most introspective. Kimono shift again. Deeper tones now, rust, gold, indigo. Patterns show maple leaves, chrysanthemums, full moons. The dances grow slower, sadder. Stories of love lost, of meetings under falling leaves. The shamisen seems to echo more in autumn halls. Guests drink warm sake. Candles burn lower. Talk turns to memory. Autumn is when the geisha is at her most human, not performing beauty, but embodying transience. Her laughter carries a hint of longing. Her glance lingers a little longer. She knows the year is ending, and with it something always leaves. Winter, the season of endurance. Then comes winter. Snow falls in Kyoto, quiet and relentless. Streets narrow with ice. The Hanamachi moves slower, but the geisha remains. In this season, she wears her heaviest kimono, layered, warm, regal. Color returns. Crimson, black, pine green. Embroideries show snowflakes, cranes, pine, bamboo. In her dance, there is stillness, not from fatigue, but from intention. Winter is the time of the most sacred performances, New Year celebrations, secret banquets for elite patrons, tea ceremonies that mark both gratitude and farewell. Maiko wear white camellia in their kanzashi, rare, quiet, strong. There is little light in winter, but in the okaya, candles glow, and the geisha, wrapped in silence and silk, becomes the season itself, living the calendar. For geisha, the year is not simply a sequence of days. It is a living map, one etched in gestures, in fabrics, in flavor. Time becomes tactile. The calendar is not on the wall. It is in the sleeve of her kimono. It is in the scent of incense. It is in the color of her obi cord. Each month has expectations. Each week has atmosphere. She does not just observe the seasons. She embodies them. In January, she bows deeper. In May, she moves lighter. In September, she listens longer before speaking. No moment is casual. No choice is accidental. To be geisha is to be aware, always, of where she stands in time. Symbols on silk. Kimono are more than clothing. They are narratives, visual poetry. Each one is chosen with precision. In March, a kimono may feature sprigs of nanohana, rapeseed flowers, signaling the end of winter's grip. In July, one might wear patterns of streaming water or kingyo, goldfish, evoking the longing for coolness. In October, crimson maple leaves scatter across dark silk like a memory. The obi, that wide, elaborate sash, offers contrast, story, or tension. Its knot may hint at occasion. Casual, formal, celebratory, solemn. And the sleeves, they whisper mood. Long sleeves suggest youth, flirtation. Shorter ones, maturity, poise, restraint. The geisha's outfit is a conversation without words, and the astute guest listens with his eyes. Floral code, the language of kanzashi. Hair ornaments, or kanzashi, are perhaps the most intimate symbols of the seasons. Maiko wear elaborate, often handmade kanzashi that change every month. January, pine and plum blossoms, renewal and endurance. April, cascading cherry blossoms, fleeting beauty. June, irises, protection from evil. November, chrysanthemums, longevity, quiet strength. December, rice cake motifs, prosperity, year's end. The complexity of the kanzashi reflects the maiko's rank. Senior apprentices wear more restrained pieces. First years may seem like walking flower beds. This isn't vanity, it's communication. A guest who notices a change in kanzashi is seen as thoughtful. A geisha who wears hers with dignity is seen as grounded. The floral code is a dance of attention, an unspoken bond between artist and audience. The sound of seasons. Seasons are not only seen, they are heard. In the okaya, a single bell may announce the arrival of summer. The soft chirp of suzumushi, bell crickets, might accompany a night of autumn poetry. Wind through bamboo screens becomes part of a performance. The shamisen, plucked by practiced fingers, shifts with the time of year. Bright, rhythmic pieces in spring. Whispered, nostalgic melodies in fall. Sparse, minimalist notes in winter like footprints in snow. Sometimes the most profound performances are silent. A fan opening slowly, A single step on a tatami, a breath held just a moment longer. This is not theater. It is seasonal truth made visible. Seasonal tea and sweets. Even taste follows the calendar. A guest at a summer banquet may be served chilled matcha, poured over ice, with delicate yokan, jelly dessert, shaped like a flowing stream. In winter, a thick, foamy matcha is paired with mochi made of roasted chestnut, dusted with powdered sugar like snow. Every dish reflects the moment. A geisha studies this. She learns not only how to serve but how to predict what a guest will crave, what flavor matches the rain, what warmth belongs to this day in February. This sensitivity is not luxury. It is hospitality elevated to art. Women of time. To be a geisha is to be a woman of time, not trapped in it but fluent in it. She doesn't age by numbers. She ages by seasons performed. Her youth is marked by first spring dances, her middle years by flawless summer fan work, her later seasons by the calm dignity of autumn walks. A geisha may retire in her 40s, or she may remain a pillar of her hanamachi into her 60s, no longer entertaining nightly, but teaching, mentoring, guiding. Each has lived 100 years of seasonal memory, even if she has only seen 50 on the calendar. The spiritual calendar. Beyond the physical and emotional is the spiritual. Certain dates matter deeply. Gion Matsuri, July, a grand Kyoto festival where geisha represent their district. Hasaku, August 1st, a day when geisha visit their teachers and elders to express gratitude. Setsubun, February, the day before spring begins, when evil is driven out with beans and fortune is invited in. These aren't mere traditions. They are anchors. They remind the geisha that she is part of something larger, a lineage, a community, a culture that holds her even as the world changes. The seasons within. Seasons are not only outside, they are within her. Spring, when she begins uncertain and bright. Summer, when she masters, poised and radiant. Autumn, when she questions, reflective and wise. Winter, when she preserves, silent and strong. Every geisha lives many lifetimes within a single life. By the time she retires, she knows the season never truly ends. It only changes form, and even in absence, she remains part of the rhythm. Conclusion of Chapter 7. The geisha is often mistaken for a relic, but in truth, she is a seasonal phenomenon, a living embodiment of nature, time, and change. Where others age, she evolves. Where others forget, she remembers. Where others pass through the year, she becomes it. To see her walk is to see the season walk. To hear her voice is to hear the weather turn. She is not separate from the world. She is the world, refined into grace. Chapter 8. The business behind the beauty. Behind the graceful gestures, the layers of silk, the silence of tatami halls, lies an often overlooked truth. The world of the geisha is a business, not in the cold commercial sense, but in the structured, calculated, and deeply disciplined reality of sustaining an art form that requires money, management, and maintenance. To be a geisha is not only to perform, it is to pay, to invest, and to understand an economic system that has evolved quietly over centuries. The cost of becoming. Before she earns, she must pay. A young girl entering an Okiya geisha house does not do so freely. She is taken in, fed, clothed, trained, but this hospitality is not charity. It is credit. The Okiya becomes both home and lender. Every lesson in dance, shamisen, tea ceremony, and etiquette adds to her debt. A single high-quality kimono may cost thousands of dollars. A full wardrobe? Tens of thousands. Maiko hairstyles require professional upkeep every few days, involving wax, combs, hairpieces, and time. Then there are the fees for instructors, traditional dance, odori, lessons, musical instruments, koto, shamisen, drum, tea ceremony classes, calligraphy, dialect coaching. All of these services are provided before the Maiko earns a single yen. She becomes, in effect, an investment. Traditionally, she was expected to pay it all back once she became a full-fledged Geiko. Today, contracts vary. Some houses write off the debt, others reduce it, and some still keep precise ledgers. But the truth remains. Art is expensive, especially when perfection is the goal. The price of performance. When a geisha performs, she does not work for tips. She works on booking planned, formal, and highly structured. A client wishing to book a geisha for a tea house banquet must go through proper channels. Typically, this means a ryotai, traditional restaurant, or a tea house, okaya, known to host geisha. These venues act as intermediaries and protectors. They verify the client, ensure payment, and maintain discretion. A standard booking includes a base fee per geisha, often hourly, with rates increasing for seniority, a meal and drink charge for the client and performers, entertainment charges for games, music, and performances, service fees for the tea house or restaurant. All of this is recorded meticulously and often not negotiable. A single evening may cost between 80,000 yen to 200,000 yen, approximate $600 to $1,500, or more, depending on the number of geisha, the status of the venue, and the nature of the event. High-end clients, politicians, business tycoons, cultural leaders may spend exponentially more. But in return, they are offered something priceless: privacy, elegance, and the presence of women trained to make them feel timeless. The modern marketplace. In earlier times, geisha thrived in a closed system. Clients were known. Houses had relationships. Everyone played by the same rules. But the post-war world, and especially the internet age, has changed this landscape dramatically. Many Hanamachi geisha districts now face shrinking client bases. Younger Japanese professionals are less interested in tradition. Foreign tourism brings curiosity, but not always cash. Some geisha have adapted, offering public performances at cultural centers, participating in tourist-friendly banquets with reduced fees, teaching workshops on etiquette, dance, and language, appearing in media from documentaries to photo books. These activities help cover costs and raise visibility, but they also raise attention. How much tradition can be sold before it is diluted? There are debates within the Hanamachi about this. Some elders disapprove of commercializing geisha. Others argue that evolution is essential for survival. The consensus? Dignity must remain intact. Even in adapting, a geisha must never feel on display. She is not a museum piece. She is a practitioner of a living, breathing art. Clients, sponsors, and the economy of loyalty. Long ago, many geisha survived not by individual bookings but by having a dana, a patron. These were often wealthy men who funded a geisha's lifestyle, lessons, and wardrobe in exchange for emotional closeness, artistic access, and sometimes romantic involvement. The relationship was contractual, though rarely written. And while some were exploitative, many were genuine partnerships. Today, dana are rare. Fewer men are willing to fund an artist's life long-term. Economic uncertainty and social change have made the model difficult. Still, some Geiko have close, long-term clients who offer reliable bookings and discreet support. In Kyoto, for example, it is not uncommon for a retired CEO or artist to quietly fund a favorite Geiko's yearly obi order or sponsor a small concert in her name. These acts are not announced. They are given and received with quiet grace. The house as a business, inside the okiya. An okiya is not simply a home, it is a business entity. The woman who runs the house, the okasan, or mother, is both caretaker and manager. She is responsible for managing finances, paying for lessons and supplies, booking appearances, maintaining kimono, hair accessories, and shoes, upholding the house's reputation within the hanamachi. When a new girl is accepted into the okiya, it is a financial risk. If she fails to finish training or decides to quit, the house may lose thousands of dollars in unrecoverable costs. Thus, selection is careful. Girls are interviewed not only for charm and appearance, but for resilience, humility, and potential. Once she begins working as a maiko, a percentage of her earnings goes to the okiya to repay expenses and to maintain operations. Even established gaiko contribute, though some eventually become independent. An okiya with a famous gaiko brings prestige and more clients. But it also brings pressure to uphold a name, to maintain high standards, to continually invest. Failure to manage these finances responsibly has ended more than one okiya. Supply chains and silent professions. The business of geisha does not exist in a vacuum. Behind each performance is an economy of support. Kimono makers who dye, stitch, and embroider for months at a time. Obi weavers who work on looms that produce just centimeters per day. Kanzashi artisans who create intricate hairpieces for each season. Dance teachers, often in their 70s or 80s, who carry generations of knowledge. Shamisen craftsmen who adjust every string to emotional tone. All of these professions are endangered. As fewer girls enter the world of geisha, fewer artisans can sustain their craft. Supporting geisha is not just preserving a performance, it is preserving an entire economic ecology. This truth is rarely spoken aloud, but among the elders of Kyoto and Tokyo, there is quiet concern. What happens to tradition when its infrastructure begins to rot? Tourism and the tightrope of authenticity. In recent decades, tourism has both saved and stressed the world of the geisha. On one hand, international visitors bring fresh attention, money, and curiosity. Cities like Kyoto have introduced public dances, cultural evenings, and even photo ops with maiko, often actresses in costume. On the other hand, this exposure has led to misunderstanding and confusion. Tourists chase real maiko through the Gion district for photos. Some mistake geisha for escorts, echoing outdated myths. Others assume they can simply hire one without context. In response, many hanamachi have introduced rules. No unsolicited photography. Guide only access to certain alleys. Tourist events clearly labeled to distinguish from authentic geisha gatherings. There is a careful line to walk. Too much openness risks cheapening the art. Too much secrecy risks cultural extinction. Most gaiko prefer a middle path. Open the door just enough. To educate, to inspire, but never to perform for free. Social media and the new geisha economy. Some younger gaiko have cautiously entered social media, Instagram, YouTube, even private blogs. They share carefully selected photos, a kimono sleeve, a flower from their kanzashi, a quote from poetry. No selfies, no behind-the-scenes gossip, just a whisper, and it works. Fans follow, interest grows, bookings increase. A Tokyo geisha might post a short video of her playing shamisen. Within days, she receives a message from an art collector in Paris asking to fund a live-streamed performance. This is not selling out. This is survival on her terms. Social media, when handled respectfully, becomes a new platform for old elegance. But it is not for everyone. Many elder gaiko refuse to engage. Some feel it vulgar, others simply unnecessary. The divide is generational and practical. Not every geisha wants to be seen. Some want only to exist quietly, as they always have. The price of dignity. What does it cost to remain a geisha? In today's Japan, a full formal kimono set, including obi, underlayers, footwear, etc. 2 million yen, 15,000 plus dollars. Monthly lesson fees, dance, music, T80,000 to 150,000 yen, 600 to $1,100. Hair maintenance, 30,000 yen plus per month. Accessories and seasonal updates, 200,000 yen plus per year. Living expenses, rent and shared house costs. Varies by city but not cheap. A successful geisha must make enough to cover these costs, support the okiya, and retain a sense of financial independence. Those who cannot, they often quietly retire. Some become instructors. Others marry and leave the life behind. A few enter the broader entertainment world, theater, TV, even politics. But all of them carry the experience forever. The business of beauty does not guarantee riches, but it teaches a woman how to survive with grace. Conclusion of Chapter 8. The geisha is an artist, but she is also a manager, an accountant, an entrepreneur of elegance. To see her only as a fantasy is to miss the infrastructure that sustains her, the invisible network of effort, expense, and exactitude. Art costs, tradition costs, and for the geisha, every bow and fan movement is backed by years of investment. Yet she never shows the weight. She glides, she smiles, she makes it all look effortless. That, too, is part of the business. Chapter 9, Exit and Evolution. Every performance ends. Every season turns. And every geisha, no matter how celebrated, must one day step out of the light. She does not simply vanish. She transitions quietly with care, often with ceremony. In the Hanamachi, this transition is not failure. It is evolution. But what comes after the curtain falls? What becomes of a life built around precision, beauty, and ritual when the time comes to live without them? The moment of decision. There is no official retirement age for a geisha. Some dance into their 70s. Others step away before 30. The choice is personal, though shaped by circumstance. Common reasons for leaving. Marriage. Though technically allowed today, marrying often requires retirement. Health. The physical demands of dance, kimono, and schedule can become too great. Financial independence. Once debt is paid, some choose other paths. Desire for anonymity. A lifetime of being watched can weigh heavy. End of career trajectory. Not every geisha becomes famous. Some plateau, then part quietly. Before departure, a geisha informs her okiya and tea houses she has long served. If she is prominent, there may be a farewell banquet or performance. But just as often, her last night comes like any other. A final bow, a last walk home under paper lanterns, and then silence, paths after the path. There is no singular life after geisha, but patterns emerge. 1. Marriage and family. In the past, geisha were forbidden to marry while active. Today, it is technically possible, but rare. Why? Because being a geisha is a total commitment. It leaves little time and less privacy. When marriage does happen, it often marks the end of the geisha chapter. Some marry patrons. Others marry quietly, choosing ordinary partners and ordinary lives. There are stories of former geiko becoming devoted housewives. Tending gardens, raising children, their past life never spoken aloud. Their neighbors may never know who they once were. And that is exactly how they want it. 2. Teaching and preservation. Others stay near the art even if they no longer perform. They become instructors of dance, tea, etiquette, music. Their students may be maiko or ordinary citizens learning for culture's sake. Some open private studios. A few teach abroad, spreading the traditions internationally. They are keepers of memory, women who carry the feel of things no book can teach. Many are never seen in public again, but through them the lineage continues. 3. Business and independence. Some former geisha leverage their reputation to start businesses. Teahouses, kimono shops, cultural event companies, art curation or tourism consulting, beauty and skincare lines. Their names carry weight. Their presence, even retired, lends elegance. A few even write memoirs, rare but impactful. Others find roles in media, advising filmmakers or appearing in documentaries. In these cases, the transition is outward-facing. They take what they've lived and translate it for a wider world. 4. Return to anonymity. And then there are those who disappear. No social media, no photos, no interviews. They become ordinary women again, or as ordinary as one can be after living as art. They walk without white makeup, wear jeans instead of silk, take the train during rush hour, line up at the grocery store, but something in them stays. The posture, the patience, the presence. They are invisible but unforgettable to those who knew them. When the fame fades, not all geisha become legendary. For every famous geiko, dozens remain known only in their district. When they leave, there is no article, no final photograph, just absence. Some struggle with the loss of identity. After years of being admired, they face a world where their name means little. Depression is not uncommon. Neither is loneliness, especially for those who left young or left suddenly. For this reason, many hanamachi try to keep connections open, inviting retired geiko to observe dances, mentor maiko, or attend quiet dinners. Still, the transition is rarely easy. To live as a geisha is to live within a structure. To leave it is to enter ambiguity. Stories of departure. Though geisha rarely speak publicly, a few have left behind memoirs, interviews, or accounts that offer glimpses into their exits, each shaped by its time, place, and personality. Yukako, the quiet fade. Yukako was a Kyoto geiko known for her mastery of the kodo. For over 25 years, she performed with calm precision, rarely speaking in public. When she decided to retire at age 48, there was no farewell event. She simply informed her okiya, paid her final dues, and returned to her birthplace in Nagano. Locals say she now lives alone near a river, tending a modest garden. Occasionally, she plays kodo at a local shrine, unannounced. She declined all interview requests. To those who ask, she says simply, "That part of me belonged to another time." Minami, the media embrace. Minami, by contrast, leaned into post-geisha visibility. She left Gion at 34, after 12 years as a celebrated dancer. Within months, she launched a YouTube channel offering tutorials on kimono dressing and Japanese etiquette. Her tone is calm, her style elegant, never showy. She avoids gossip, never names clients, and maintains a respectful distance from scandal. Yet her audience now numbers in the millions. Through her, many foreigners have encountered geisha traditions for the first time. She is, in her own way, a bridge between silence and storytelling. Aki, the cost of leaving. Not every story ends well. Aki was a maiko who left after only 2 years, exhausted by the pressure, unable to meet expectations. She returned to her family home in Osaka and found it difficult to re-enter school or work. Employers found her too quiet. Peers called her weird. She struggled with anxiety and identity. Eventually, she found solace in calligraphy, a skill she'd learned during training. Now, she teaches part-time at a cultural center. But she does not speak of her past. not out of shame, but because no one seems to understand what it meant. The ethics of silence. There is no official code of conduct for retired geisha, but tradition holds certain unwritten rules. Never disclose client identities. Do not comment on rival houses or scandals. Avoid political or commercial statements that exploit the geisha image. Preserve the dignity of the art, even in modern reinterpretation. Breaking these expectations may not lead to legal trouble, but it can result in ostracization, quiet removal from the cultural circle. Former geisha know this. They walk a careful line, even in retirement. When they do share stories, they focus on aesthetic and emotion, not detail or drama. There is a kind of discipline even in memory. The image of the ex-geisha in media. Films and novels have long dramatized the fallen geisha. Often, the former geiko is portrayed as a lonely figure longing for youth, a bitter woman disillusioned with men, a mystical teacher of forgotten elegance. While evocative, these images often distort reality. In truth, most former geisha live ordinary, peaceful lives, with private joys and quiet routines. They may host old friends for tea, attend student recitals, visit shrines in the early morning. Their past is not a burden, but a foundation. They are not ghosts. They are evolved artists still walking the world, just without the spotlight, passing the torch. Perhaps the most important role of retired geisha is this: to transmit what cannot be written down. Dance steps can be filmed. Tea ceremonies can be diagrammed. Music can be recorded. But the timing of a glance, the weight of silence, the feel of a season inside a room, these are things that live only through presence. Elder geiko are often invited to sit behind a maiko's dance practice. They do not speak unless asked. Sometimes they only adjust a finger or nod slightly. This transmission is ancient. It is non-verbal. It is essential. Without these women, the art fades into imitation. A new kind of legacy. As times change, so do the ways geisha leave a mark. Some donate their kimono to museums. Others sponsor scholarships for future performers. A few write books, not memoirs, but guides for young women about discipline, attention, and presence. These acts do not seek fame. They seek continuity. One former geiko, age 76, was once asked what she missed most. She replied, "Nothing. The art was never mine to keep. I only held it for a while." This is the essence of evolution: to leave without regret, to give without need for recognition, to know the beauty was never about you, but about something older and larger. Conclusion of Chapter 9. The life of a geisha does not end, it transforms. It becomes memory, mentorship, quiet power. Though the public may forget her name, her presence lingers. In students, in silence, in style, in tea, in the curve of a dance learned by another. The geisha who exits does not fade. She deepens like ink on handmade paper. Subtle, permanent, essential. Chapter 10. The future of the geisha. The geisha is a symbol of Japan's grace, of discipline, of timeless elegance. But symbols are vulnerable. As the 21st century advances, the geisha faces a profound question. How does one preserve a living tradition in a world obsessed with speed, efficiency, and spectacle? This is not a crisis of art. It is a crisis of relevance. And yet, the story is not over. Not yet. Today's landscape, a fractured presence. In today's Japan, geisha exist in pockets. Kyoto's Gion district still holds the most visibility. Tokyo's Asakusa and Shinbashi continue with smaller hanamachi. Kanazawa and Niigata support regional traditions. A handful of newer okiya open in cities like Fukuoka and Nagoya. But the numbers are sobering. From an estimated 80,000 geisha in the 1920s, fewer than 1,000 remain in 2025, and only a fraction of those are active performers. Of those, many are in their 40s, 50s, and beyond. Few new Maiko enter each year. Okiya struggle to stay solvent without outside support. Yet despite their rarity, geisha hold outsized cultural weight. They appear on tourism posters. They're referenced in school curricula. They're requested by foreign dignitaries during state visits. And in moments of national reflection, the geisha is still seen as a quiet emblem of true Japan. Tradition under pressure. Multiple forces converge to challenge the survival of geisha culture. 1. Urbanization and modern lifestyle. Modern Japanese youth grow up in concrete cities, attend cram schools, and dream of tech careers. The geisha world, with its long unpaid training, strict etiquette, limited privacy, economic uncertainty, feels remote, even alien. Even when young women admire geisha, few are willing to enter that world. Families hesitate to support it. Society no longer sees it as a viable path. 2. Cost and accessibility. As detailed in earlier chapters, the cost of running an okiya and training a geisha is immense. Few investors are willing to fund art that doesn't scale or promise return. Tourism can help, but not replace deep patronage. Without sustained support, tradition decays quietly. 3. Cultural misunderstanding. Global audiences remain confused about what a geisha is. Popular fiction, especially outside Japan, has romanticized or eroticized the image, blurring the line between artistry and servitude. This misunderstanding makes many young Japanese reluctant to be associated with the label. To be called a geisha outside Japan, one Maiko said, is to be mistaken for something you are not. This makes promotion difficult in international spaces. Glimmers of revival. Despite these pressures, not all is fading. In the last decade, new initiatives have emerged. 1. Government grants and cultural protection. The Japanese government now offers heritage funds to help okiya with costs. Certain geisha districts have been recognized as intangible cultural properties, giving them access to preservation support. While bureaucratic, this signals official acknowledgement that geisha are not mere performers, they are living history. 2. Digital engagement. Some young gaiko and instructors have embraced the internet on their own terms. Quiet Instagram accounts with seasonal imagery, YouTube channels showing basic etiquette and history, collaborations with kimono designers or tea artisans for online showcases. These are not flashy influencers. They present with dignity, offering access without exposure. It works. Interest grows. Young people become curious. The stigma begins to shift. 3. Cross-cultural collaboration. Geisha have participated in UNESCO performances, cultural exchanges in France, the US, and Southeast Asia, private workshops with international artists. Some have even trained foreign apprentices. A controversial but bold move. Though these programs are rare and carefully structured, they show a new possibility. Tradition not exported, but shared. The fork in the path. Survival or symbolism. As we look to the next 25 years, several scenarios emerge for the future of geisha tradition. Scenario 1, the living fossil. In this path, geisha become increasingly rare, preserved but no longer active. Their performances occur only at formal state functions or as museum-like reenactments. Young people stop training. Kia close one by one. The final gaiko performed to polite applause, not deep understanding. In this version, the geisha becomes like a samurai, real once, now symbolic. A cultural relic, elegant, untouchable, gone. Scenario 2, modernization with roots. Another possibility: the geisha world adapts carefully and intentionally. Changes might include shortened training periods, more flexible work hours, hybrid performance spaces, live plus digital, integration of modern musical forms while preserving dance, use of crowdfunding or art patronage platforms for support, rebranding geisha as high-level cultural consultants or heritage ambassadors. In this scenario, tradition remains anchored, but less rigid. The geisha is still trained, still devoted, but not imprisoned by old rules. Rather than resisting the present, she helps shape it. Scenario 3: Rebirth through fusion. Here, the geisha evolves into a new form altogether. She might be a virtual educator using immersive tech, a cultural diplomat traveling the world, a curator of Japanese experience centers for international visitors, an interdisciplinary artist collaborating with global creatives. In this path, much of the old ritual disappears, but something essential remains: grace, control, presence, silence, story. Whether or not she wears white makeup, whether she performs in a tea room or on a digital screen, the spirit survives. Not identical, but authentic in a new way. What must be protected? Regardless of the path, certain things should not be lost. Cyclone discipline, the slow mastery of form. Cyclone elegance, not glamour, but restraint. Cyclone awareness of season, of space, of the other. Cyclone language, spoken and unspoken. Cyclone quiet, the power of stillness in a noisy world. These are not just geisha traits. They are human capacities, ones worth cultivating in any era. To lose them would be to lose part of ourselves. The geisha in 2050. What might the geisha look like in 25 years? Perhaps she is wearing kimono woven from recycled silk, dyed with AI-assisted patterns, performing in immersive environments combining digital and physical space, teaching etiquette and emotional intelligence to global leaders, leading inner-city youth workshops in presence and poise, training through augmented reality but mentoring in person, known more for how she listens than how she moves. Or maybe she will look much like today, kneeling on tatami, arranging flowers, welcoming a guest, one cup of tea at a time. But whether her audience is 2 people in Kyoto or 20,000 online, her essence endures. Sparkle's mastery without ego. Sparkle's performance without applause. Sparkle's identity shaped by intention, not noise. Words from the silence. In preparing this chapter, modern scholars and journalists spoke with several retired Geiko. They were asked, "What do you hope people remember about geisha in the future?" Their answers were brief, measured, precise. That we listened, that we prepared before acting, that we did not need to speak to be heard, that being present was enough. And finally, from a geisha who began in the 1960s, now nearly 80, that we were not decoration, we were presence, and that presence taught people how to live. Final reflection: a quiet continuum. The geisha does not demand survival. She does not campaign or cry out. She simply continues, as she always has, by doing the work, in silence, with grace, until someone comes along to learn. And when they do, when one girl places her foot exactly so, lifts her hand just right, feels the beat of a drum through her spine, the tradition lives again, not because it was preserved, but because it was lived, not as nostalgia, but as now. If the story resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Your support helps keep these quiet histories alive. Share your thoughts in the comments. What moved you? What surprised you? Or what you'd like to learn more about? Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious and stay kind.